This is a very complex case, one that goes far beyond the ordinary challenges of surgery or the routine emergencies. Fans of reality television are accustomed to witnessing doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, and surgical technicians all gathered around 12 professionals preparing themselves for a full day in the operating room. Because this was not going to be a simple procedure, it was a case with so many moving parts, so many risks, so many unpredictable twists, that even the medical team acknowledged it could last hours upon hours. What was about to unfold was not just a surgery, but a fight for survival. A struggle that many fans of 1000 Sisters will never truly know about, because so much of what really happened has been hidden, edited, or buried. What the cameras captured, but executives chose to lock away, remains among the darkest and most disturbing secrets in the reality television vaults. Fans believe they've seen everything. Every tear, every argument, every whine, every hospital stay, every victory and setback that Tammy Slaton has endured. But the truth is that what has been shown is only a fraction of reality. Behind the cliffhangers and the dramatic music cues, behind the carefully chosen footage and the hopeful narratives, there exists a world of raw, terrifying, heartbreaking scenes that never saw the light of day. Hours upon hours of film sit locked away, containing moments that would have altered the way the world sees Tammy and her family forever. Moments so grim, so graphic, and so unsettling, that the decision was made to conceal them, protecting both the network and its stars from an avalanche of outrage and despair. At the center of this darkness lies Tammy Slaton herself, the woman who has carried the show with her outsized personality, her brutal honesty, and her never-ending battle with her own body. But within that story is a nightmare almost too horrific to tell. A nightmare that took her to the very brink of death. The skin rot ordeal. Tammy has spent more time in hospitals than any of her siblings. Her struggles with food addiction, oxygen dependency, and immobility have been chronicled endlessly, each season painting a picture of a woman caught between wanting to live and giving up entirely. Yet even devoted fans who follow her on TikTok, who speculate during her mysterious absences, who anxiously await updates after each hospitalization, have never seen the worst of it. That's because some of Tammy's most terrifying medical battles were filmed but never aired, hidden away by TLC executives who decided the truth was simply too much for television. And none of those buried moments were more horrifying than the time Tammy nearly died from a fast-spreading necrotic infection, a condition where her skin literally began to rot away. The story begins not with an explosion of drama, but with something deceptively small. A patch of irritated skin, a smell she could not ignore, a pain she insisted was nothing but a rash. Those around her urged her to seek treatment. Her family begged her to let doctors take a look, but Tammy, stubborn and tired of hospitals, dismissed their concerns. For weeks, she brushed it off, insisting she would be fine, even as the pain worsened and the odor grew stronger. By the time she was finally convinced to go to the hospital, it was already too late. What doctors found shocked even the most experienced among them. Tammy was suffering from necrotizing cellulitis, an aggressive infection that eats away at skin and tissue, spreading rapidly and threatening to overwhelm the body. For someone Tammy's size, with compromised circulation and limited mobility, it was the perfect storm, a silent killer hiding in the folds of her body, waiting for the chance to consume her. TLC's cameras were rolling when Tammy was wheeled into the emergency room that night. Crew members later described it as one of the most disturbing scenes they had ever captured. Nurses shouted commands, alarms beeped, and the acrid smell of decaying flesh filled the room. Doctors moved quickly, ordering for antibiotics, wound cultures, and emergency One nurse, overheard on camera, was said to have whispered words that still haunt those who heard them. "She won't survive the night if we don't get this under control." It was chaos, the kind of chaos that reality television thrives on. The kind that would have kept millions glued to their screens in horrified fascination. And yet, none of it ever aired. Instead, what viewers saw was a sanitized version, a vague mention of Tammy's hospital scare, followed by a neat summary and a quick return to the family's everyday drama. The truth, deemed too shocking, too grotesque, too damaging, was buried. But those who were there remember. They remember the screams, the cries of pain as doctors tried to clean and dress her wounds, the family sobbing in the hallway, praying she would pull through. They remember Amy collapsing into a chair, whispering that she couldn't lose her sister. They remember Amanda's fury, demanding to know why TLC insisted on filming when Tammy's life hung by a thread. They remember Chris breaking down, confessing to producers that he thought this was it, that Tammy was not going to make it. All of it was caught on tape, and all of it was hidden. Instead, Viewers were given a version of events that painted Tammy as dramatic but ultimately fine, reducing her near-death experience to nothing more than another bump in the road. The perfection spread faster than anyone could have predicted. Within days, Tammy's skin began to blacken, the rot eating deeper and deeper, threatening her bloodstream, threatening sepsis, threatening her life. The stench was so overpowering that nurses reportedly wore double masks, gagging as they worked to keep her stable. Doctors told the family that there was little hope. The infection was winning, and Tammy's body, already so compromised, might not be able to fight back. In one of the darkest moments, it's rumored that Tammy lost consciousness, her monitors screaming as her heart rate plummeted. For a moment, some thought she had already died, but doctors fought, performing chest compressions, shouting orders, refusing to let her go. Against all odds, Tammy survived that night. But her ordeal was far from over. For weeks, she remained in the hospital, undergoing painful treatments, daily wound cleanings, and constant monitoring. Her body was weak, her spirit even weaker. Sources say that for the first time, Tammy broke down completely, sobbing, begging her family not to let her die. She reportedly told them she didn't want her last moments to be filmed, that she wanted dignity, that she couldn't bear the thought of her suffering being turned into a spectacle. And yet, cameras continued to roll, capturing everything, from her anguished cries to her whispered prayers. Crew members were shaken, some unable to watch, some questioning why they were even filming at all. But the footage was stored away, never to be aired. The family's pain was unimaginable. Amy, already overwhelmed with her own children and health struggles, felt guilty for not forcing Tammy to get help sooner. Amanda, always fierce, clashed with producers, accusing them of caring more about ratings than Tammy's life. Chris, usually the steady one, confessed that he couldn't handle watching his sister waste away any longer. It was a breaking point for all of them, a moment that could have united fans in sympathy, that could have changed the way Tammy was perceived forever. Instead, it was erased, replaced by carefully edited clips that downplayed the severity of her condition. The infection eventually began to respond to treatment, but the damage was done. Tammy's body bore the scars, both physical and emotional. She emerged from the hospital weaker than ever, traumatized, her skin permanently altered, her trust in the world around her shattered. Yet fans were never told the truth. Instead, they saw a storyline about Tammy being difficult, Tammy resisting rehab, Tammy struggling with oxygen. They saw a woman painted as stubborn and lazy, not a woman who had stared death in the face and barely lived to tell about it. That was the choice TLC made, to hide the darkest truth in favor of a narrative they could control. But what does that choice mean for fans? It means that everything they think they know about Tammy's journey is incomplete. It means that behind the jokes, the fights, the rehab stints, lies a story of unimaginable pain and resilience. It means that Tammy Slaton, the woman so many have mocked or dismissed, is stronger than anyone realizes, because she has endured horrors the world has never seen. And it means that reality television, for all its claims of authenticity, is still just a carefully constructed illusion, one that hides more than it reveals. The hidden hospital tapes, the secret footage of Tammy's skin rot nightmare, are perhaps the most disturbing example of this yet. When Tammy finally returned home from that long, excruciating hospital stay, nothing was the same. Her body carried new scars, the skin grafts and raw patches serving as constant reminders of how close she had come to losing everything. For the first time, she could not hide her vulnerability. She had survived something most people couldn't even imagine, but surviving didn't mean she was free. She was weaker, more dependent, and her family, though relieved she was alive, began to treat her differently. No one would admit it out loud, but they all feared she might not survive another incident. They hovered over her more, checked in constantly, and worried about every cough, every complaint, every grimace of pain. It was like living in a permanent state of alarm, waiting for the next disaster to strike. And Tammy, who hated being treated like a child, grew restless, angry, and defensive. She didn't want pity, she didn't want whispers, and she didn't want to feel like a burden, even though, deep down, she knew that was exactly how things were. The cameras, of course, were back, following her every move, but what they captured wasn't the triumphant return TLC executives wanted. Instead of a hopeful story of recovery, what unfolded was messy, complicated, and filled with unspoken resentment. Amy, balancing her role as a mother with the pressure of caring for Tammy, found herself stretched thin. She tried to put on a brave face, smiling for the cameras, but behind the scenes, she was exhausted. At night, she admitted to close friends that she was terrified Tammy's health scares would never end. that one day she would get the call saying her sister was gone. Amanda, protective as ever, pushed Tammy to take her health seriously, but her approach often came across as harsh, sparking arguments that ended in shouting matches and slammed doors. Chris, always the steady voice, tried to encourage Tammy with gentle words and practical advice, but even he struggled to stay hopeful when he saw the toll the infection had taken. The truth is that Tammy's ordeal with skin rot had changed the entire family dynamic. No longer was her weight loss journey just about numbers on a scale or fitting into smaller clothes. It had become a matter of literal survival. Every choice she made, every meal, every skipped appointment, carried life or death consequences. The infection had been a warning, a brutal, undeniable sign that her body could not endure much more neglect. Doctors had told her plainly, "If this happens again, you may not survive." It was the kind of ultimatum that should have shaken her to her core. And for a time, it did. Tammy began to speak differently, softer, more reflective. She admitted to her siblings that she was scared, that she didn't want to die, that she didn't want her story to end in tragedy. For a brief period, hope returned. Fans watching might have believed they were witnessing a turning point. But reality is never that simple. Tammy's fear, though genuine, often collided with her stubbornness, her addiction, and the complicated emotions she carried. She wanted to change, but change demanded a level of discipline and endurance she wasn't sure she had left. And so, her story became one of contradictions. On some days, she spoke passionately about wanting to live for her family, about wanting to be there for her nephews, about proving the world wrong. On other days, she lashed out, refusing help, rejecting advice, retreating into herself. The family walked on eggshells, trying to support her without pushing her too far. But the unspoken truth was always there. Tammy was running out of chances. Behind the cameras, crew members whispered about what they had seen in the hospital. Some were still shaken by the memory of the smell, of the sight of Tammy's decaying skin, of the way doctors had fought to keep her alive. They questioned the ethics of filming someone in such agony, of turning her suffering into content. A few even threatened to quit, insisting they could not, in good conscience, continue working under such conditions. But television is a machine that rarely slows down. And TLC, ever focused on ratings, reminded them of their contracts, their obligations, and the importance of capturing reality, even if reality was brutal. The footage remained locked away, and Tammy's near-death experience became just another shadow hanging over the family. For Tammy herself, the trauma lingered in ways she couldn't easily articulate. She confessed in rare unfilmed moments that she still had nightmares. Dreams where she was back in that hospital bed, screaming as doctors scraped away her dying skin, begging for the pain to stop. She admitted she sometimes woke up in tears, afraid the infection had returned. She was haunted by the knowledge that her body had betrayed her, that something as simple as a rash could spiral into something deadly. And yet, despite all of this, she often found herself slipping back into old patterns. Reaching for food as comfort, using humor to deflect, shutting down when people pushed her too hard. Trauma does not erase addiction, and fear does not guarantee change. That was the cruel reality Tammy lived with every day. The family's frustration grew. They loved her, but they couldn't ignore the truth. Each of them had seen her close to death, had prepared themselves for the possibility of losing her, and it had left scars of their own. Amy admitted she sometimes felt resentment, that caring for Tammy had cost her precious time with her children. Amanda, though fierce, admitted that her anger was often just fear in disguise, fear of losing her sister. Chris, who had once believed Tammy could turn it around, confessed that his hope was fading. Their love for Tammy was real, but it was tangled up in exhaustion, guilt, and desperation. And the cameras, always rolling, captured bits and pieces of this raw, complicated reality but never the whole truth. TLC continued to shape the narrative, presenting Tammy as difficult but redeemable, painting her struggles as obstacles to be overcome with perseverance. But those who lived it knew better. They knew that Tammy's battle was not just against food or weight, but against her own body, a body that had already given her a terrifying glimpse of the end. The skin rot ordeal had been more than a health scare. It had been a confrontation with mortality. And though Tammy had survived, she was not the same. Her family was not the same. Nothing was the same. And still, life went on. The show went on. Cameras followed the family to cookouts, doctor's appointments, shopping trips, and therapy sessions, as though nothing had happened. Viewers laughed, cried, and speculated, unaware of the hidden darkness just off-screen. Social media buzzed with jokes, memes and criticism, painting Tammy as lazy, stubborn, or dramatic. Few realized that she had endured something so horrific it could have broken anyone. Few understood the strength it took just to get out of bed, to face another day, to continue being filmed when she wanted nothing more than to disappear. That was the cruel irony of Tammy's story. The world thought they knew her, but the most important truths were the ones they were never allowed to see. Her skin slowly healed, but the scars remained, not just on her body but in her soul. And though she rarely spoke of it publicly, those who were closest to her knew that the infection had marked a turning point. Whether it would be the turning point that saved her or the one that foreshadowed the end, only time would tell. The infection had given her a second chance, but second chances are fragile, and Tammy's was already slipping through her fingers. The weight of what had happened never truly left Tammy, no matter how much she tried to joke, smile, or shrug it off in public. For her family, the ordeal lived in their memories like a shadow they could not escape. They had seen her body betray her, watched her writhe in pain, listened to doctors describe her skin rotting away as if it were a medical case file instead of their sister, their daughter, their aunt. They had prepared for her death once already, and though she survived, the trauma of that preparation never fully dissolved. It sat in their bones, in the back of their minds, always waiting for the day when it would become reality. Every time the phone rang late at night, Amy froze, terrified it was the call. Every time Tammy coughed or complained of a small ache, Amanda braced herself for the worst. Every time Chris saw her cancel an appointment or reach for food she wasn't supposed to eat, he felt the crushing helplessness of someone who wanted to save a loved one but didn't know how. Tammy herself was trapped in a paradox. The ordeal had made her more aware of her fragility, more frightened of death, more conscious of her body's limits, and yet, that very awareness sometimes made her reckless. She hated being fragile, hated being treated like she was breakable. The more her family hovered, the more she resisted. When they begged her to stick to her diet, she lashed out. When they reminded her of how close she came to dying, she snapped, insisting she didn't need to be lectured. It was as though part of her would rather risk everything than live in constant fear. Defiance became her way of fighting back, but that defiance often hurt her more than it helped. Fans who followed her on social media saw flashes of this. They saw her laugh and tease, dance in TikToks, show off her progress, and insist she was fine. They wanted to believe her. They wanted to hold on to the idea that Tammy was on the road to redemption, that her near-death experience had changed her forever. But those who had been watching her for years knew the pattern. Tammy had promised change before, had shown progress before, had even seemed on the brink of transformation before, only to fall back into old ways. For them, the infection wasn't just a scare, it was a countdown clock. How many more times could she cheat death before it caught her? How many more times could her body endure the strain? The producers leaned into this tension, subtly feeding the narrative while keeping the darkest truths hidden. They knew fans tuned in not just for inspiration but for drama, for the question of whether Tammy would rise or fall. And Tammy, whether she realized it or not, had become the center of that drama. Every setback, every argument, every hospital trip kept viewers glued to their screens. But behind the spectacle, behind the carefully edited episodes, lay a woman whose life hung in the balance, whose suffering could not be neatly packaged into story arcs and cliffhangers. There were moments, though, when Tammy's vulnerability broke through the walls she had built. Late at night, talking quietly with Amy or Amanda, she admitted she was tired of fighting her body, tired of being judged, tired of carrying so much pain. She confessed she sometimes wondered if it would be easier just to let go, to stop struggling, to accept the inevitable. And in those moments, her sisters cried, holding her hands, begging her not to give up. They reminded her of how far she had come, of how much life she still had to live, of the people who loved her. And Tammy, tears streaming down her face, would nod and promise she wasn't ready to go yet. But those promises were fragile, whispered in the dark, easily broken when the sun came up and the cameras rolled again. For her fans, the infection became a symbol. It was no longer just about weight, or surgery, or diets. It was about survival itself. They debated online whether Tammy had the strength to keep going, whether the family could support her enough, whether TLC was helping or exploiting her. Some were hopeful, pointing to her weight loss, her improved mobility, her moments of joy. Others were grim, convinced it was only a matter of time before tragedy struck. Every photo, every video, every rumor was dissected for clues. Was she healthier? Was she slipping? Was this the beginning of her comeback, or the beginning of the end? And Tammy, living her life in front of millions, could never escape those questions. Even in moments when she wanted to be just a woman healing, grieving, laughing, or resting, She was Tammy Slaton, star of 1000 LB Sisters, Public Property, forever scrutinized.